Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now then, you're very welcome along. Heineken Champions Cup weekend to come. Very happy to bring in Mr. Matthew Williams. Hello.
Hello, Joe. Good to talk to you, mate.
Yeah, likewise. Anyone ever call you Matthew?
I think if we compared notes, only my mother when she was angry with me.
Yeah, that's generally the one.
Did your mother call you Joseph when she was angry with you?
Joseph meant bad things.
Yes, Matthew meant bad things as well.
Okay, understood. So we might start with Heineken Champions Cup. We have Connacht Leinster Friday 8 o'clock. We have Toulouse against Ulster 3:15 on the Saturday. Exeter Munster 5:30 on the Saturday. Going to be interesting to see how this captures the imagination, or to what extent it does. This was, a litmus test for this new schedule. The group stages we had maybe didn't fire, and the payoff is hopefully about to happen. That's the thinking anyway.
Yeah, that's the theory on paper, Joe. As I've said on your show before, I'm not a fan in any way of the new format. I think it really downgrades the competition. But having said that, there are some very good games coming up this weekend. The problem is, for the competition as a whole, when you look at their performance over a 12-month period, a lot of the clubs haven't earned their position in a playoff / round of 16 stage. So where the public stands and the power it generates, we have to find out over the next month. So basically they're banking on a 5-game run, the round of 16 games home and away, quarter, semi and final to generate the momentum, if you like. And the jury's out. I don't like it. I'll be upfront in saying that, but we've got to give it the time to see where it takes us.
We might start with the Friday night game, and let's look at this initially from a Connacht point of view, because it's mission impossible in some respects from their point of view. Their form of late very average. They steadied the ship somewhat at the weekend with a 21-17 win in Treviso. Matt Hansen was back, Jack Carty was back, Finlay Bealham was back, and Bundyaki is due to be back for the game against Leinster. But before that, it was worrying. They lost 45-8 against Leinster at home, an early red card notwithstanding, and then the week before that, 56 points conceded away to Edinburgh. They lost 56 points to 8. And they've had some other not great scorelines. February 4th before that, 32 points conceded away to Ulster, scored 12. Their defence, Matt's been very average. They have conceded the second most points in the URC. Only Benetton are below them. So those scorelines worry you going into any competition, not least against Leinster.
Yeah, they have to. They have to. Their attack has been really a positive aspect. They're playing very Leinster-like in their players. Andy Frienders, his heritage and the way he's always coached is such a positive mindset on how to play the game, and they're trying to get in position very fast like Leinster and Ireland do, play off the front foot, play quick ball. But as you say, Joe, it's what happens when the opposition have got the ball that really catches them. There was one try on the weekend that Benetton scored that put them in the lead at, I think it was about the 70-minute mark. It might have been the 68th minute. But, it put them in the lead with Benetton in the lead with the final few minutes. And, of course, Connacht came back and scored a very good try late in the game. But it was everything that's wrong with Connacht. You could see their Connacht defence, you could see they were very compact. They overcommitted. They jam in, they come in, and they left a good, I'd say, 25 metres of the width of the field unmanned. And Benetton just threw some nice passing, give Benetton credit, got the ball to that part of the field and they exploited the space against Connacht. Now, the problem for Connacht is that's everyday bread and butter for Leinster. That's what they do better than almost anyone in Europe. Having said all that, I know for a fact that Leinster hate going to the sports ground. It's Leinster's least favourite ground in the world to go to. They don't, and that's been a graveyard for them over the years. And Connacht have a history of rising up against Leinster. That's their game. They love standing up for that, and the Interpros, but especially against Leinster. So, this is almost mission impossible. Any other club, I'd say it was, but not quite for this leg. They've got to keep Connacht have got to keep everyone on the field. You could see the game is just so hard when you get a red card or even a couple of yellow cards. It's almost impossible to hold the quality attack that Leinster have out. But they've just got to get their due right. Now, it's a bit of a trite statement I'm making because they haven't done that to date, and they're going to have to defend a lot better than they have done this year if they've got any hope.
And do the tries they're conceding and the issues even you highlighted from Treviso at the weekend, do they strike you as individuals making bad reads or bad errors, or does it speak more to the system in some way?
I think there's a little bit of both there. Andy Friend's a good mate. I've got to put my cards on the table. I had a beer with him a couple of weeks ago, and I love seeing him again. He's a great guy. Yeah. So, and I'm not going to do that. We had a private chat. I'm not discussing anything we said there, but you know, I think their system of set play, and Andy and I didn't talk about this. We didn't talk, you know, nuts and bolts. But in my opinion, their system of defence off set play, as I just described, especially in their 22, is not. It's not good for them as a team. In other words, you've got to have a system that suits your talents. And I just think when they come up against really high-quality, skilled teams, that is what the top end of the European final is about. They get caught out with that. In amongst all of that, there's some really bad missed tackles, some really, really bad missed tackles that are not anything to do with anyone except the individual player's responsibility. Okay. So they've got both problems going for them, Joe, which is tough.
Okay. I suspect you and Andy Friend talked about Eddie Jones for about a half hour, did you?
He did come up in the conversation.
Nothing sure.
He did come up in the conversation. Andy has some great stories about him because he worked for him for a while. Yeah. Some great stories. But yeah, look, Andy's a champion fella, and we haven't had a chance to sit down and have a long talk for many years. So it was a really, really great night.
Yeah, I'm sure. On Leinster then. I don't really know how to analyse Leinster for about 3/4 of the season. Like, they look great. They always look great at this point. They're sailing through group stages in Europe. They're sailing through URC opposition. And then in recent years, they've been sucker punched by a La Rochelle or a Saracens. And so in a sense, I feel like with Leinster, it's just a countdown for 3/4 of the season until we can get into the real stuff. So that part of the season is approaching. What are you saying about them this year, Matt?
Well, Joe, I sort of take it as and you and I have had this conversation before as well, but I take it from a different point of view. You're just not going to win Europe every year. It just doesn't happen. You know, the most it's been done is to lose with 5. It just doesn't happen. It's too hard. Leinster last year go to Exeter, played quite magnificent rugby. Yes, so almost some of the second half was equal with anything I've seen Leinster play in 23 years. It was magnificent rugby. And then they lose to La Rochelle the week later. Everyone says they can't handle the big guys. But gee whiz, you know, Exeter at Sandy Park, that's renowned for its physicality and the forward pack and the boring but very abrasive nature of Exeter's rugby. So I just think you've got to have all the stars aligned for you in Europe to win it. That's just the way it is. The last couple of years that hasn't happened, but Leinster have played magnificent rugby. And last year they had a crap draw. They had a really tough draw. It was a COVID year like this year is, and they're going to have a tough draw again this year, I feel, because of the injustice that I believe was measured out to them after they were forced not to play the Montpellier game. So we'll have to wait and see after the round of 16 where they land. Yeah. If you don't get a home quarter, it's really hard. It is a really, really hard road to hoe if you don't get a home quarter. So Leinster are very capable. They're playing great rugby. You look now. If we switch that on its head, Joe, I was watching the game against Munster, and basically the Irish forward pack comes out, and then the Irish forward bench comes out at the 6-minute mark. You know, now. At the international level, no one's saying, gee, we got out-muscled by France, we got out-muscled by England. Now, England to get a player sent off. We didn't get out-muscled. It was hard and it was tough, but that was the Leinster pack against the French pack made up from, I think, 4 clubs or 5 clubs, the starting team across France. Yeah. So we got to keep this in a perspective. Yes, they did lose some bad, and I wouldn't say bad games, but they didn't play well and they don't deserve to win. To win in Europe, everything has to go your way. You've got to beat injuries. You've got to make sure everyone's fit and healthy. You've got to be mentally strong. You've got to get a good draw. And on that day, everyone's got to turn up and be good. And look, I can show you the scars where that just doesn't happen. But it can happen for Leinster, for sure. There's no two ways about it. It can happen this year. It's a weird competition in the restructuring. So there's things we don't know. There's things that Leo Cullen doesn't know. But right now, they are playing exceptionally good rugby.
Yes, and they're favourites across the board generally with the bookies, and Toulouse as well as the general view on things. Yeah. You know, it's quite interesting. It's a national pastime here to wonder what will happen with Ireland if Johnny Sexton doesn't play. We don't talk about Leinster in those terms. Is that because Ross Byrne has certainly proven himself at European level? I know a lot of people thought he was very good, for instance, against Munster, and yet when it comes to internationalers, we don't really... He's not featuring in the conversation so much over the last year, 18 months in particular, and yet we don't kind of say, God, what will Leinster do if there's no Johnny?
Leinster are in great shape with no Johnny. Ireland aren't, but Leinster are. It's funny, isn't it? It sounds counterintuitive. I think a bit of that is Leo. I'll wind back a little bit, Joe. I looked at that Leinster team and I saw what he'd done with his out halves, and I went, wow, like you really want to, you've got to beat Munster. Like that's, and all the old boys are texting each other, going, you've got to beat Munster, you've got to beat Munster. And all the Munster boys are texting each other, you've got to beat Leinster, you've got to beat Leinster. And Leo gets it right again. Leo gets his selections absolutely spot on, and he does it time and time and time again. So I think a big difference in Ross Byrne's mental state when he runs out for Leinster is he knows the coach believes in him. But to be fair to the national boys, when Ross has been given his chance at the national level, he hasn't grabbed it. But then neither has anyone. But I do believe we have not seen the best of Ross Byrne. I do believe Ross Byrne has a role to play in a green jersey. And I think he proved that last weekend, that he is not by no means a spent force. And some guys just take longer to mature. And maybe he's got time in him. I personally have always rated him, and I've been very disappointed with the way he's played in a green jersey, but I haven't lost faith in him. And Leo obviously hasn't, and Ross in a blue jersey hasn't lost faith in his own abilities. So it's a really interesting position for Ross to be in, and for that out half position for Ireland.
Yeah, it's very striking. Ulster are in Toulouse, so what a reward for a very good group stage on Ulster's part. And then it's hard to read too much into recent form because the Six Nations is still washing out of the system, but they're off the back of 2 defeats in South Africa. Those South African sides are hitting their straps on home soil. Toulouse, since the start of the Six Nations, have lost 6 of 9 matches, lost 6 of 9. However, 10 of their players are off winning a Grand Slam, and sadly for Ulster, they're pretty much back. So I was going to ask you, Ulster here of late have a lot of great players in their back line and can put together brilliant passages of rugby and veer more towards like a free-flowing style when they're at their best. Now that would strike me if you're bringing that Toulouse will say, beautiful. I mean, you want to play that kind of a game? We're all in. Do Ulster need to almost go back to like very structured, kind of traditional bad Irish weather type effort here away in France?
If it rains in Toulouse when Ulster play, it will be a blessing for them. But forecasts don't look good for that, Joe.
Okay.
We had a cold snap, last week. If anyone watched the Irish women's test, was in Toulouse, and it was bitterly cold. I think Saturday was the coldest April night since 1947. So it was really, really cold down here. But I don't think that's going to happen on Saturday. The weather's changed. The problem with going to Toulouse, Joe, is you've got to score points. Yeah. You can't rope it to Toulouse. They're going to score a minimum of 3 tries.
Okay.
Usually 4. So you've got to go in with the same mindset. And if you're going to, the other part is you've got to keep your for and against up. If you get smacked and you get beaten by 30 points, it's really hard to, at the end of that round, the home and away fixtures to be on top, even if you win at home. So excuse me for knocking my computer there. I don't think they'll do that. It's very interesting too. Hugo Muller, the coach of Toulouse during the Six Nations, was saying how hard it is to win both competitions. In other words, to win the top 14 and to win the European Cup. I have a sneak, and Guino Vez, before him, the legendary Toulouse coach, used to have the same approach. He would always say, it's one or the other. You very rarely get 2. and last year Toulouse got the double. I actually don't think they're going for it. I think they're going for Europe. Now, they lost a lot of games because they had a lot of players out and they had some injuries. Those boys came back and they were really tired last week. They got beaten by Cast, and Cast deserved to win. It was a close game and they lost it in the dying seconds, but still Cast deserved to win that game. I think you'll see a different Toulouse on Saturday because they'll be looking where they are in the top 14. They won't give up. They're about 6th. I just checked the scores, the ladder before we came on, and they're 6th. They're not out of it, but you've got to finish in the top 2 in the top 14 to have a shot at doing both because you get some weekends off. If you don't, you're basically playing knockout rugby in Europe and in the top 14 for almost 2 months, and it's just not possible. You can't keep it up. So I think their eggs are in the Heineken Cup basket, and that they're again in the competition, Joe. That is not a reward. A competition should be structured that rewards excellence across the season, across the pool stages, and that competition has not rewarded Ulster with anything but pain.
Well, God bless them all the same, Toulouse, because we need some of these teams to start taking the competition seriously and treating it as a marquee event. So that is fascinating. And will that go down okay with the Toulouse fans? I suspect so, given the rich tradition.
Look, I don't want to give the impression that Ugo Muller's put up the white flag. Sure. Said, we've given up on the top 14. He's just saying the facts. It is really tough to do both. And that has been, he's not the first French coach to say that, because the top 14, mate, it's an endurance event. Starts in late August and goes till this first weekend in June. They're just absolutely shattered. So a lot of these clubs are looking forward to Europe to get a weekend off. It'd be really fascinating to see what Montpellier do this weekend against Harlequins, because Montpellier are leading the top 14. Philippe Saint-André, the new director of rugby who's come in there, has done a miracle job on this club, and they are leading top 14 in early April. And he's going to be, with the Holy Grail, is the Bouclier de Brennes, the trophy for the top 14. He's going to be after that. So what does he do in Europe? This will be a really fascinating selection. So that you sort of figure it out from who they pick. Yeah. But I'll guarantee you this, mate, like Toulouse are no holes barred going for Europe. That's their club.
Very interesting.
I think that'll be a really, really great exhibition for the Ulster fans.
This is certainly one of those games where the first, second leg dynamic is to the fore, I think. It's generally in certainly Champions League and the football we watch, it's seen as a great advantage to have the second leg at home where you know what you have to do. So what would be a good deficit for Ulster to take back to Belfast, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's a really, really tough. I'll start with the easy part. Toulouse are going to win this game. Well, the whole tournament's going to spin, from an Ulster point of view, is going to spin on that deficit. Toulouse will win, but can they stay close to them so that the points for and against is minimalised, and can they limit Toulouse to not scoring too much? In other words, the bonus point system don't come into play in what we do here and there. So, look, a close loss will be as good as a close win for Ulster. I really do fancy Ulster at home at Ravenhill. It's a very special place. When I was coaching them up there, the crowds, they really get behind you. We had Harlequins once there, and they'd beaten us at the Stoop. We came home. It did rain, coming in sideways off the lock, which was a plus. But the crowd lifts. The players believe in themselves at Ravenhill, what they don't believe in themselves at other venues. And they could spring a great upset at home, but they've got to stay close at Stade Wallon. That's going to be the key.
Yeah. I saw Dupont working his magic again at the weekend. Invariably he pops up on everyone's Twitter feed doing something stupid. Like I'm kind of sick of you guys on Virgin doing a Dupont piece before a game, because we just do it every game. But he won't stop. He won't stop.
Mate, we let everyone into our pre-show phone hookups. Everyone goes, "Oh, we're so sick of seeing that brilliant little scrum half Dupont. Let's show someone who's ordinary, And the trouble is, he's World Rugby Player of the Year and Player of the Six Nations, and the defensive systems that are used at the moment, without getting too technical, but they don't set up. They allow the players that arrive around the ruck to what they call flow, to move. Now, in the old days, they used to lock 1 and 2 into the system. So whoever was first and second arriving, you couldn't leave. Your job was to stay there. And the whole idea was to stop great scrum halves that were around then, like Justin Marshall and the players at the turn of the century. Georgie Griegan was another one that they were trying to stop in those days. Now, because that's changed, because the threat was out wide, DuPont is just having a field day with the big props in it that around the ruck. And as soon as you watch him, he goes in and he just lifts his head and he looks at their hips or toes. And if their toes are pointing out, that means their first step is away and he's into this space here. Mm. And he's just a genius at it. And the other thing he does, he'll run, hold them in, okay, no, they're square. Then he'll throw the pass out the back to Entomac. So he's held 3 or 4 defenders straight away. That creates space out wide. It's so easy for me to explain, but doing that in the heat of battle, doing it every ruck, week after week, and doing it brilliantly and making just incredibly good decisions all the time, he is on the verge of being regarded as one of the all-time great players. He's a bit young for us to get to that yet, but if he keeps healthy, and I hope he does, I really hope he does, he's going to tick all the boxes because they're going to win things. He's going to perform. He's going to be a leader. He's going to be the captain, and he's a champion. And we're on a period of time like watching Brian O'Driscoll and Paul O'Connell. We have got a potential all-time great that our generation is going to have the pleasure of watching for a number of years.
To tap into your French insight again for a moment, so Bordeaux La Rochelle is one of the games this weekend, and it just so happens they played each other in the top 14 the weekend just gone. It was a big win for La Rochelle, 16 points to 15, a big win for Ronan. That nudges them up to third in the table on the heels of Bordeaux, who are in second. People at this stage would have seen O'Gara and Christophe Urios on the sideline having a tete-a-tete. Urios afterwards quoted as calling O'Gara unbearable, which was a hell of a line. I mean, I'd agree with it, obviously. It was a hell of a thing to say. And Rog was basically saying, like, you know, he didn't appreciate that I was encouraging my players and I'm a young coach. I need to talk a lot. I want my players to hear me on the pitch. I have a lot of energy. It's important that I pass it on to them, is what O'Gara said. And, you know, much ado about nothing. Does Urios have previous here? And what's been the reaction here? Oh,
well, it's just been a bit of pantomime, hasn't it? But I have just laughed so much when you know Ronan O'Gara, and having coached against him for a decade, he's the most competitive human being you could possibly imagine. You walk off the pitch, and Ronan's an absolute gentleman. You know him well, Joe. He's a great guy. I love his company. Yeah. But you go into any form of competition against Ronan O'Gara, and he's going to throw everything at you, including the kitchen sink. What he did, and it's not for me to throw. I'm in a glass house here because I've had my arguments as well, so I'm not criticising. I'm telling. Ronan went down the side and he did step out of it. There's a little rectangle on the side, same as soccer. You know, the coaches and managers are supposed to stay in it. Now, the vast majority around the world, it's not a problem because the coaches sit up in the stand, which Ronan usually does as well, because that's the Australian, New Zealand, Irish way of doing things. The coach sits up in the stand because you've got the big picture. You can see the whole pitch. The French thing is much more ego-driven by the head coaches on the sideline. Now, when you're on the sideline, you actually can see bugger all. It's not a good place for a coach to be. He should be up in the stands, but the French like it because they're in the cameras, and you know it's what the people expect and the coaches like. I don't agree with it. Ronan went down late in the game because there's this real tussle that La Rochelle kicked a penalty goal. West kicked a penalty goal literally after full time to win the game, and it was a big win for them. And they just had a clash head to head. The fourth official should have said to Rog, "Hey, Rog, just stay within that rectangle and you're all right." He came out a bit. And Urios was out of line going over to Ronan and saying it. And so he does the same thing. He leaves his box to tell him to stay in his box, you know. So it was much ado about nothing. But his comments after the game I thought were very funny, and I thought Ronan was very restrained from not saying something back. But it was a pantomime on the side. But for those people that know Ronan, as everyone in Ireland does, it was very funny.
Yeah, and man, that they have to see each other again this weekend, and then the second leg as well. I mean,
that's the one I'm looking for, because I'll have money. Sorry, Joe, I'll have money Ronan baits him. I'll have money on it. Ronan goes out of his way to bait him.
Christoph, you think he's unbearable now? Come back to us in 3 weeks. Munster then, away to Exeter, 1934 defeat to Leinster. I don't know how much of the media you've followed over here over the last couple of days, but the general sense has been very dispiriting from a Munster point of view. That's 11 Leinster wins in 13 meetings. It's hard to fathom if you go back not so long ago in Irish rugby. Peter O'Mahony was talking yesterday, and O'Mahony obviously has a very intense loyalty to the camp. And even he said, he used the phrase, it's not ideal, when he was referring to the management situation, the question marks over who's coming in. So I would think that's a hell of a euphemism if you were to talk to him privately. For instance, Liam Toland, who's often, very reasoned judge of things, was on the show on Monday, and he used the phrase of some of Munster's approach against Leinster. He said some of it's from the dark ages. There's no sense of momentum about this season for them, so they have to go to Exeter now.
Yeah, Joe, I've got it written down here as well. So if you go down, I did a little article in the Irish Times talking about their academy under 19s and 20s. And, and the clubs, at Munster clubs on the weekend, Lansdowne 61, Cork Con 24, Old Belvo 41, Shannon 7, University College Cork 17, UCD 42, Young Munster 8, Trinity College 57. Right through the ranks, there's reason, in Munster, it's reasons to be worried, to be concerned. The pipeline certainly isn't brimming. The academy isn't brimming. 2 coaches leaving. Now, the coaches have... This is the hard part about coaching. If you do the wrong thing and you keep the fact that you're leaving quiet till the end of the year, you're doing the wrong thing by the club where you're currently at. By telling them you're leaving, you're giving them plenty of notice to get organised. But there's very rarely a time when a coach says in January or February, I'm going, that the rest of that season is wonderful. Very, very rarely. Michael Checker did have some in his final year. He did do some very good things in his final year, but usually the club loses momentum, which is what has occurred at the moment. Having said that, the tactics, so that's one side of it.
Yeah.
But you don't know because you're not in the room. The team might have just not played the tactics. But the tactics that were employed by Munster against Leinster were just quite unbelievable. It wasn't like the way that Stephen Larkham, the attack coach, has been setting Munster up for the previous couple of years. They seem to have really taken some backward steps, and that may very well be the mood of the camp. But that's still no excuse to go out and play the way they did. And if you actually go on the highlights of the game on the United Rugby website, on their YouTube channel, the first half is just kicks. Literally just kicks. You do not see Munster pass the ball once. You see Joey Carberry having shots at goal. Now, it was a pretty ordinary editing job, but it just sort of tells you something about what was going on out there. So it's not great. Now, Exeter aren't in fantastic form. They're okay. They're fourth in the Gallagher Premiership. They had a good win on the weekend. Now it's against Bath, who were stone motherless last. But, going to Sandy Park, one thing you've got to do, you've got to be united and you've got to be positive and you've got to play rugby. Because if you just sit back like Munster did against Leinster, you become a punching bag against these guys. You've got to play rugby against Exeter, like Leinster showed last year in the quarter-final. So it's certainly, it's a very, very high-pressured situation for Munster this weekend.
Various observers have made the point that when Ben Healy came off the bench and went to 10, and Casey as well came off the bench at 9, and Joey Carberry moved to 15, Munster looked much better. And there is a sense in many people's eyes, I think Stuart Lancaster, don't quote me on that, but I have a very vague memory of Lancaster saying, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, saying maybe they see Carberry as more of a 15 than a 10. I don't know if I've ever asked you that before. Do you see him as a better option at 15 and maybe a better use of what Munster have at their disposal potentially?
It's an interesting conversation that I've had with Rob Carney and Shane Horgan as well on a couple of occasions.
Okay.
I like Hurley as a 10. Let's start with that one. He's a good player, a really good player. He's got huge potential. I don't think Joey, since his ankle injury, has taken the ball forward as a 10 as he used to. I think he's much more static, and that is not efficient attacking play for a 10. So if you watch Sexton or Ross Byrne the other day, because that's the way they're coached at Leinster, you have to be moving onto the ball before you catch it. You can't catch the ball stationary as a 10, because all that does is draw the defence to the players outside. You must be moving forward onto the ball on every single occasion, unless you're kicking. And even then, sometimes it's worthwhile doing it to build some momentum, to get momentum of your body into the kick. But Joey at fullback would have more space. There's no two ways about that. He's not a big man, and his aerial skills in a box kickathon that some teams would put in to practice against him would be tested. But I don't think it is a proposal that is outrageous. The problem is for Ireland, where does that leave Ireland at 10, which brings us back to the conversation we had at the beginning about Ross Byrne and Jack Carty. Where does that leave us with who is Sexton's replacement? But, Joey he's not back to anywhere near the form he was, prior to the long layoff he had after really since before the 2019 World Cup. He hasn't had any decent run of games to build up his self-belief, and, as I said, to get that forward momentum. And that takes, Joe, that's a lot of confidence, Joe, because as a 10, you've only got half a second or a second on the ball while the defence is coming at you. You've got to make decisions. So your automatic reaction is to stay still, to give yourself more time. So that's why Sexton is so great. He does everything counterintuitively. He denies himself space and time by taking the ball forward, because he's just so confident in his own abilities. And that's what makes him one of the great players of all time. And if we look across the ditch, the water to Marcus Smith, look at him with Harlequins, fantastic attacking player. For England, he was so deep and in the pocket, not moving on the ball. England's attack was horrible. His kicking game was magnificent. But Marcus Smith's ability to get attack going for England was suffering because of the exact same problems that Joey has at the moment.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that develops over the coming weeks. We're here with Matt Williams. Our rugby coverage and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. 2 last quick points before I let you go. So, Women's Six Nations continues, round 3 this weekend. Ireland beaten in Toulouse, as you referenced earlier on, 40 points to 5 by the French. They now play Italy at Musgrave Park on Sunday. They lost their first home game against Wales, with the Sevens crew departing the scene after round 3, and England to come, and then Scotland in the last round. This Italian game, if they're going to win a game, seems readily available and very important. Some of the stats from the game in Toulouse: 18 handling errors. Ireland lost 5 lineouts. Once again, as with the Welsh game, scrum and in big trouble. John Fogarty and Paul O'Connell in touch with the Greg McWilliams coaching ticket to try and help things. And look, there's a lot to fix there, and it's a very young team, and yet you got to be fair and accept as well. I think they're all going into camp until maybe Thursday evening, because they all have jobs, and there's a lot to get right, and you can overload a group. So I don't know, as a coach, that's a real challenge. Up front, set piece, skill set, and a few other things besides to get through.
Yeah, mate, it's you're right, Joe. There's sort of, when we describe it, you don't want to bash onto the players or put them down, but in the same breath, you got to be honest, and also say, look, some of those things are not. It's not things you should be better at because you're going to camp on Monday, Sunday night, or Thursday. Now, going into camp on Thursday is outrageous for me. That's wrong. They should be in camp much longer in the week. When I used to coach Island A, we'd go in on Wednesday and play Friday. Now, it was unbelievably difficult. You basically can't do anything. You just got a few little bits of organisation. But you're also dealing with guys, in my case, in the A side, that were full-time professionals with their clubs. So you're bringing in a lot of space. And then over a period of the Six Nations, you don't change a huge amount when you've got that. So they come in with some prior knowledge as well. But you got to rely on the players. Hey, make your tackles, get your passes right, and whatever our system is, stick with the system. Now, the problem was, not the only problem, but some of the problems with the scrums was that the back five were bailing out of scrums. So in other words, scrums still going on, and they're basically breaking, leaving the front rowers to themselves. Now, it wasn't the only problem, but you got no hope if your back five in a scrum are not scrummaging. You can't blame the front row if the five people behind bail out halfway through the scrum. And I saw that on a number of occasions. But the things that the individual players have got to bring is just their passing. Well, you can't throw balls in the touch. There's a couple of players in that back line who cannot pass off both hands. And you could see that was just obvious when they came to their bad hand. They really struggled with their pass. Now, that's got nothing. That's working every day of your life, like every professional player, whether you're amateur or not. It's not about money. It's about your professional standards. And if you're going to play for your country, you've got to be working at both hands. And it's not for 6 hours every day. It's for 30 minutes every day of your life. As I used to say, Ollie Campbell was an amateur. He'd drive around Ireland selling tyres, and he'd pull over the side of the road every single day, either at 5 a.m, lunchtime, or 6 p.m, find a GAA ground and kick goals. Now, to be passing off both hands, it's literally that. You just got to find a corridor in a house or an office and spend 30 minutes every day passing with your one hand to develop that hand. That sort of thing is not about camp. So there's sort of two problems here. It's the support of the IRFU for the national women's team, which is not good enough, in my opinion. And I don't think there's anyone around the rugby community that would disagree with that. But on the other hand, there is the responsibility of the individual athlete to the team. And that is making your tackles, making your passes, and whatever system you're in, stick with it. You can't change that halfway through the game. Otherwise, you get that disaster, losing your lineouts, losing your scrums, throwing the ball away. There's probably one other aspect, Joe, which is, I don't know if it's fitness, but there was a good period in the second half where the Irish team were besieged by the French team, but they made their tackles. And they tackled and they tackled and they tackled. And they got up to about 11 phases. But not on one of those phases did anyone get in and contest the ball.
Right.
So that contestability is they call it a race for space. So that's a bit of desire. And I'm not sure that team believed in themselves enough to get in there. They turned the ball over, and on the very first tackle, the French went in and contested on the ball on the tackle. So, we've got to when we talk about that problem, we've got to put it up into the areas that it is. So it's not just in one area; it's across a number of areas. And you're right, solving that on a Thursday, playing on the Saturday and Sunday, that's a tough ask for any. It's an impossible ask for any case. The players have got to turn up ready to rock for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did have a skills session on a Tuesday evening, but again, it's not quite in camp. It's more of a session. Very last point. Terribly sad, because this guy was a player. Dan Levy retired at 27. Yeah, very, very sad. Joe, you and I have had these conversations over the years, and I was just thinking, when I was playing and later, this was a very common thing, because medical science now fixes most things. If you did a cartilage in your knee in the 1970s, you were finished. So we were sort of more used to guys having to give it away in their early 20s, late 20s, because of a shoulder or a knee or ankles. They're the three. And they would give it away because they just couldn't repair it. And obviously the damage to the knee is just been too much. And give Dan Levy full credit for taking the medical advice and listening to the experts and saying, look, I'm disappointed, heartbroken, and he'll have a mourning period where he mourns his career, like everyone that's been in it has to do. But he's smart enough to do that, and he'll get on with his life, and he'll make his life a great success. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be sad for him and upset for him, and he's going to need his old mates and his rugby community to stick with him, not just tonight. The hard part comes in a couple of weeks, even months, because your identity is you are a rugby player, a rugby coach. You are. What am I? I am. And all of a sudden you're not. And that's when it gets
that's when it gets tough for everyone. Everyone in the game feels it. Some get it worse than others, but everyone in the game feels it. And I'm sure that he's an intelligent enough man to get that support around him to get through those days where you feel a bit lost.
Well, we wish him well.
Yeah.
Matt Williams, thanks so much.
Pleasure, Joe.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.